A voicemail just 19 seconds long. Later, I'd play it over and over, sitting in my workshop, even though I knew every word by heart because that's the kind of thing an old engineer does when his hands need something to keep busy while his chest is still fumbling to make sense of what it's feeling. Just 19 seconds. Long enough for a man almost 30 years younger than me to tell me to pack up my things and clear out of the house I'd paid to own since before he was old enough to legally drink. Walt, it's Marcus. Look, Bree and I talked it over, and this living situation isn't working for us anymore. You're going to need to find your own place. We need the room. Then a click. No goodbye. I was standing in my own driveway in Sacramento, under the carport I'd poured concrete for with my own 2 hands, and I started to smile. Not because it was funny, because I was free. Let me back up, because if you've ever been slowly pushed out of your own life by people you'd have died for, I think you'll understand exactly why a grown man smiles at a moment like that. My name's Walter Hale. I'm 63 years old. I spent 34 years as a structural engineer here in the Sacramento Valley, designing things that had to hold bridges, parking structures, a wing of the Children's Hospital out on Stockton Boulevard. I know how weight moves through a building. I know how a beam that looks solid can be carrying a crack you can't see until the day it lets go. I understand tolerance and stress, and the exact moment a structure gets asked to bear more than it was ever built to hold. I thought I understood people the same way. I was wrong about that for a long time. My daughter Bree was always the brightest thing in any room. Sharp, ambitious, stubborn in the way that makes you proud and tired in equal measure. She got her degree, landed a good job doing brand work for a firm downtown, and for a while she was building something that looked like a real life. Then she met Marcus at a coworker's backyard wedding out in Folsom in the spring of 2018. 6 weeks later, she was calling me every other day, his name woven into every sentence. I tried to be glad for her. He had a good handshake and an easy laugh, the kind of man who knows exactly how long a first impression needs to last. They married 14 months after they met. I thought it was fast. I kept that to myself. I keep a lot of things to myself. That turned out to be part of the problem. Here's the part that still sits heavy in me. My wife, Diane, died in the fall of 2019. Ovarian cancer, and it moved like a flood 5 months from the first scan to the last breath. 31 years of marriage, and then I was alone in a 4-bedroom house in the pocket neighborhood that suddenly felt like it was built out of echoes. I'd wake up at night and reach across the mattress for a woman who wasn't there. Bree was shattered too. We grieved together that year, and I'll be honest with you, that shared grief was the one good thing that terrible season gave me. I held on to it like a railing. Then, about 6 months after Diane passed, Bree called me with that particular tightness in her voice. She and Marcus were in trouble. His landscaping company had bled out half its contracts during a bad stretch, and her firm had frozen salaries. They were behind on rent. Could they stay with me? Just for a little while. Just until things steadied out. I said yes before she finished asking. And I want to be clear about something, because people love to play armchair quarterback with a man's worst decisions. At the time, yes was the right answer. She was my daughter. She was hurting the same way I was hurting. I had 4 empty bedrooms and a pension, and no reason on God's earth to say no. Saying no didn't even cross my mind. What I didn't know was that a little while meant something completely different in Marcus's vocabulary than it did in mine. The first year was fine. Better than fine some nights. They were quiet. Marcus picked up a few new contracts and seemed to be clawing his business back. Bree worked from the dining room table. We'd eat dinner together 2 or 3 times a week, and on the good evenings, having people in the house pushed back against the silence Diane had left behind. I let myself believe it was working. The second year is when I started seeing the edges. It was small at first. It always is. Marcus rearranged the living room without asking me, moved my reading chair into a corner where the lamp didn't reach. He swapped out my coffee maker for one he liked better and set mine out in the garage like it was trash. He started parking his truck dead center in the driveway, so I had to crank my own truck sideways to squeeze in beside it. None of it was worth a fight on its own. That's the trick of it. None of it is ever worth a fight on its own. But it adds up. Crack by crack, it adds up. Bree changed too. Or maybe she just stopped hiding something that had always been in there, and I hadn't wanted to look. She started treating me less like her father, and more like a roommate who needed managing. Little notes on the counter about keeping the kitchen cleaner. A comment about my truck leaking oil onto the driveway, as if that driveway had fallen from the sky, and not from 26 years of mortgage payments out of my own checking account. I read those notes and felt something I couldn't name yet. I know its name now. It was the feeling of becoming a guest in your own home. By the third year, Marcus had stopped pretending altogether. He worked when he felt like it. The landscaping company technically still existed, but he'd shrunk it down to 3 or 4 clients and spent most of his days on my couch watching games and sketching out big plans he never once followed through on. Bree's paycheck carried the two of them. My roof, my power bill, my groceries carried everything else. One night, around 2 in the morning, when sleep wouldn't come, I sat down and did the math the way I'd done load calculations my whole career. 4 years of housing, food, utilities, all of it. The number came out somewhere north of $170,000. Neither of them had ever offered me a single cent. And here's what I want you to understand. I wasn't keeping that number out of bitterness. I was keeping it the way you log a stress reading you don't like. Quietly, carefully, waiting to see if it would get worse. It got worse. The comments started the way these things always start, in some kitchen somewhere small enough to deny. One night Marcus told a buddy over dinner, with me sitting 12 feet away, that living with an old guy who's set in his ways was a lot to deal with. He laughed when he said it. I was close enough to count the ice cubes in his glass. Another time Bree suggested, gently, that I think about downsizing because the house is a lot to keep up at your age. I was 62. I ran the levee trail 3 mornings a week. I'd rebuilt the back deck myself the summer before Diane got sick. But sure, a lot to keep up. I said nothing. I'm good at saying nothing. That was never my strength. It was my wound. If you've ever swallowed 100 small disrespects to keep the peace, telling yourself that love means absorbing things, I need you to hear me. There's a difference between patience and disappearance. I didn't know that yet. I was still learning it the slow way. Then I met Carol. It was at a neighborhood association meeting, of all the unromantic places on earth. She was 60, recently retired after 30 years teaching high school English out in Elk Grove. Quick, funny, completely unimpressed with her own opinions in the way genuinely smart people often are. We started with coffee, then walks along the river, then dinner. For the first time since Diane, I felt like a man, and not just a widower keeping a house warm. I told Bree about her on a Sunday afternoon. I kept it simple. Said I'd been seeing someone, that it felt good, that I was happy. Bree set down her mug. She looked over at Marcus, who was leaning against the counter, and something passed between them, a current. I felt it before I understood it. "Dad," she said, and her voice had dropped into a register I didn't recognize. "Careful, rehearsed. I think you need to slow down. You're still grieving Mom. This sounds like a rebound. I told her your mother has been gone 3 years. I told her I'd like to have Carol over for dinner. I said I thought she'd like her." That's when Marcus set his coffee down and said the thing that changed everything. "Yeah, I'm not really comfortable with that. We live here too. We should have a say in who comes into our home." Our home. I want you to sit with those 2 words the way I had to. Our home. 4 years inside the house I'd built my whole life around. And somewhere along the line the word our had slipped in and rewritten the deed in everyone's head but mine. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had needed to. That's how it works. They don't seize the house. They just start saying our, and they wait to see if you'll correct them. I didn't correct him, not then. I picked up my keys, said I had errands, and walked out. Now here's something I need to be honest with you about, because I think this is where most people would have lost it. If that had been me 10 years earlier, I'd have stood in that kitchen and let 4 years of swallowed words come roaring out. I'd have made a scene I couldn't take back. But I didn't feel like yelling. I felt something colder and clearer than rage. I felt the quiet that comes over me right before I solve a problem I've been circling for months. I drove to Carol's apartment and told her everything. She listened the way teachers learn to listen all the way through, no interrupting. When I finished, she just asked, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I said. But under that answer, I did know. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. I came home around 10. The house was dark and quiet. I went out to my workshop in the garage and sat at my bench, where I'd been building a model for the better part of a year, a quarter-scale replica of the Sundial Bridge up in Reading, the one Diane and I had walked across on our anniversary. Hand in hand, the year before she got sick. Hand-cut basswood, The kind of project that punishes impatience and rewards a man who's willing to start a piece over when he gets it wrong. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. I almost didn't play it. Then I did. And you already know what it said. Walt, it's Marcus. Bree and I talked it over, and this living situation isn't working for us anymore. You're going to need to find your own place. We need the room. 19 seconds. A landlord serving a problem tenant. No conversation. No knock on the workshop door. A voicemail. I set the phone down on the bench. I looked at the bridge half finished, the deck not yet laid. And I thought about structures, about what holds and what doesn't, and why, about foundations that get asked to carry more than they were poured to bear. Then I picked the phone back up and called my attorney. His name is Raymond Ortiz. We'd done property work together for 15 years, going back to when I was still buying rental units around the county. It was late, so I left a message. He called me back in 7 minutes, which told me everything about how he keeps his phone close. I told him I needed to talk about my estate documents and my property situation, and that some of it was time-sensitive. We set it for 8:30 the next morning. I need you to understand something, because people assume what came next was a decision made in anger. It wasn't. The anger was down there somewhere, sure, in the basement of me, but it wasn't driving. What was driving was something I'd let go quiet for 4 years. Self-respect, that's the word. Self-respect that I'd filed away like a tool I told myself I didn't need anymore. And here's the part that surprises people. I'd actually started building toward this moment 2 years earlier. After Marcus's very first "our home" comment, I'd gone to Raymond's office for what I called a routine estate review. I updated my trust. I confirmed the deed. I checked that every utility account, every insurance policy, every tax record showed exactly one name, mine. I'd been watching the way this whole thing was developing, and I did what engineers do when they see a primary support starting to fail. I built redundancy. I laid out alternate load paths for the day the main structure gave way. So when Raymond and I sat in his conference room the next morning, I already knew the answers. I asked anyway because you check your numbers even when you're sure. They have no legal claim to the house, I said. None, Raymond said. Sole ownership has been continuously yours. No written agreement, no contribution to the mortgage or taxes. In the eyes of property law, they're guests who overstayed. He paused. Long-term guests with some statutory tenant protections, given how long they've been there. We'll have to follow proper notice procedure. How long? 30 days written notice, served correctly. If they don't go, we file for unlawful detainer. With the documentation you've got, it moves fast. Draft it, I said. I want it served by the end of the week. He nodded and made a note. Then he looked up. There's the other thing you mentioned. The co-signed accounts. 3 years back, Marcus had needed a co-signer on a truck loan. $31,000 for a commercial vehicle for the landscaping business. Bree had asked me, and I'd said yes. A year after that, a second loan equipment, another $16,000. I was on both. The remaining balance came to around $35,000. I want to come off those, I said. Raymond made another note, possible under a change of circumstances argument. Since you're formally separating the living arrangement and can document the estrangement, the lenders have grounds to reassess. The primary borrower would have to qualify on his own or find a replacement co-signer. He won't qualify, I said. Probably not. Not with that income-to-debt ratio. Raymond looked at me over his glasses for a long moment. Walter, this is your son-in-law, your daughter. I held his eyes. My son-in-law left me a voicemail telling me to get out of my own house. My daughter didn't call to say she was sorry. Raymond nodded slow. Then let's begin. I moved out of that house the same week. Not because I had to, because I wanted to, because every single morning I woke up under that roof, I felt something I had finally found the word for, erased. They'd spent 4 years quietly, methodically sanding me down until I felt like a stranger in the house, where I'd raised my girl and buried my wife, and built half the walls with my own hands. I was done feeling that way. I rented a clean 2-bedroom up in Carmichael, 20 minutes from the old place. South-facing windows, good morning light. I set up my bench in the second bedroom, brought the bridge model and my tools, and 40 years of half-finished projects. For the first time in a long while, I unpacked into a space that was only mine. The certified notice landed in the pocket on a Friday. Marcus signed for it. I know because the service sent me a timestamp. By Friday evening I had 11 missed calls. By Saturday morning, 23. I was at Carol's kitchen table working the crossword when the 24th came in. I picked up. Marcus's voice was nothing like the voicemail. Less flat. More frayed. Walt, what the hell is this letter? It's a 30-day notice to vacate, I said. Or to establish a rental agreement at market rate. You can't be serious. My attorney drafted it. It was served by certified mail. I assure you it's serious. We live here. We've been living here. You can't just... The deed shows one owner, Marcus. That's been true for 26 years, and it's true today. You've got 30 days. Either start paying market rent, which my attorney has set at $3,000 a month, or find somewhere else. There was a silence. Then, lower. This is because of that woman. You're throwing us out for her. This is because you left me a voicemail telling me to leave my own house, I said. I'm choosing to respect your request. I hung up before he could answer. Bree called 4 hours later. I let her talk all the way through without cutting in, and I'll tell you, it was hard, because what she said hurt in that specific way only your own child can manage. She said I was being vindictive. She said I was punishing her for falling in love. She said I'd never accepted Marcus, and this was just proof. And then she said the one I knew was coming. Mom would be ashamed of you. That one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. It went in clean, right between the ribs, exactly where she aimed it. I sat with it. I want to tell you I shrugged it off, but I didn't. For about 40 seconds I sat there and let it do its work, and it took everything I had to remember what was actually true. Because in her last weeks, Diane had told me privately that she worried about the man Bree had chosen. She said she'd seen something in Marcus she couldn't put a name to, and it unsettled her. She made me promise I'd stay close to Bree no matter what. Diane was almost never wrong about people. So no, my wife would not have been ashamed of me. My wife had seen this coming before I had. Bree, I said when she finished, I love you. I have loved you every single day of your life, and I will love you until the day I die. But I need you to hear me. Your husband left me a voicemail telling me to vacate the home I've owned for 26 years. Not a conversation. A voicemail. And you didn't call to apologize. You called to defend him. That tells me where I stand. I hope it changes. Until it does, the notice stands. I hung up. Outside the window, a scrub jay was working over the feeder I'd hung on the balcony 2 days after I moved in. Funny, the things that get easier the moment you finally decide. The next 2 weeks moved strange. Carol kept me steady, Raymond kept me informed, and Marcus and Bree, as far as I could tell, did nothing useful with the time they'd been given. They never contacted Raymond about a payment arrangement. They never seriously looked for an apartment. I knew because Bree's oldest friend, a woman named Janelle, who'd always had a soft spot for me, texted to say she was worried, and that Bree honestly believed I'd cave. I was not going to cave. On day 22, I drove back to the old house. Not to negotiate. I needed some of Diane's things. I'd left behind a box of her novels, her grandmother's sewing basket she'd always kept on the window seat. Marcus answered the door. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Good. I'm here for some personal items, I said. 20 minutes. He didn't move for a second. Then he stepped aside. The house felt different. It already felt like it wasn't mine, which was strange, because legally every inch of it still was. What had changed was that I'd stopped wanting it back. I gathered the box and the sewing basket and a photo of Diane and me from a trip to Monterey. On my way down the hall, Marcus appeared. We can't find anything we can afford on this kind of notice, he said. 2 bedrooms around here are going for $2,600. First month, last month, deposit. We don't have that kind of cash sitting around. I looked at him, steady. I know exactly what apartments around here cost, Marcus. I own 4 of them. He blinked. I don't think he'd ever known that. You've got 8 days left, I said. I'd use them. On the final day of the notice period, Raymond filed the unlawful detainer with the county. The hearing came fast, a sign of how solid the paperwork was. They hired a lawyer, a young guy from a tenant advocacy firm, which is good work in principle, just not when it's being used to help 2 healthy adults dodge accountability. He filed for a continuance on hardship grounds. The court gave them 1 extra week. I wasn't worried. The hearing was a Tuesday morning. Raymond and I got there 15 minutes early. Bree and Marcus came in with their attorney 7 minutes before the session. Bree in a gray dress with her hair pulled back, Marcus in a suit that fit him the way a suit fits a man who almost never wears one. They sat across the aisle. Bree looked at me once. I looked back. Neither of us smiled. Now, I want to slow this part down, because this was the moment 4 years had been building toward, and I felt every second of it stretch. The judge was a woman in her late 50s named Pruitt, with the expression of someone who'd sorted this exact dispute into a category about 45 seconds after reading the file. Raymond laid out our case the way I'd have laid out a load analysis. The deed, 26 years of mortgage and tax payments in one name. The utility accounts, the certified notice, and the delivery confirmation. The full accounting of 4 years of housing costs $170,000, and change organized in tabbed binders. Engineers love clean documentation. So, it turned out, did Judge Pruitt. I watched Bree's face while Raymond read the number out loud. 170,000. I saw something flicker across it. I think it was the first time she'd ever heard the cost of the 4 years she'd spent calling it their home. Her lips parted. She looked down at her hands. Their attorney argued hardship. He argued that my daughter had an implied right to remain in the family home. He argued the notice was retaliatory, payback for a domestic argument. Raymond responded without raising his voice. No written agreement of any kind. No financial contribution to ownership. Proper legal procedure followed to the letter. And then he said, very evenly, that if the court wished to review the voicemail in which Marcus instructed the owner to vacate the property, he had both a transcript and the audio. Their attorney went still. He hadn't known about the voicemail. Judge Pruitt looked at Marcus directly. Did you leave such a message? The room got very quiet. I could hear the air conditioning. I could hear someone's chair creak 2 rows back. Marcus's jaw tightened, and I watched him do the math. Watched him realize there was no version of the truth that helped him. I was frustrated, he said finally. I didn't mean it literally. You told the owner of the property to find somewhere else to live, the judge said, reading from the transcript. And your position is that the owner should not be permitted to act on that request. Silence. The kind that has weight to it. The court finds for the petitioner, Judge Pruitt said. The respondents have 21 days to vacate. I heard the sound Bree made. I'd know it anywhere, the sound of someone whose entire understanding of how the world worked just rearranged itself without their permission. Marcus's face went flat and closed, the way a face goes when the performance is over and there's nothing left to perform. He stared at the table. And me? I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest with you about that, because I think people expect this to be the part where I gloat. It wasn't. I felt the way you feel when you finally take weight off a beam that's been groaning for years. Just relief. Quiet, clean relief. Outside, in thin February sunlight, Raymond shook my hand and asked what was next. I'm selling it, I said. I'd decided that 2 weeks earlier. Not because I needed the money, though the number would be real. Because I didn't want to live one more night in a house that held 4 years of being treated like an inconvenience. I wanted to start clean. The listing went up that week. 4 bedrooms, mature trees, good school district, priced at $760,000. Within 6 days I had 3 offers. I took the highest $785, cash, 30-day close. A young family relocating from Portland with 2 kids and a golden retriever and a very specific list of what they wanted in a neighborhood. They struck me as people who'd fill the place with the right kind of noise. Meanwhile, the cosigner thing had been moving in parallel. I'd filed the withdrawal paperwork with both lenders 2 weeks before the court date. The truck loan cleared in 9 business days. Confirmation came the same morning we were in court. The equipment loan took 3 days more. Both banks sent Marcus certified letters saying that because of the change in cosigner circumstances, his accounts were under review, and the full balances could come due if he couldn't qualify on his own or find someone to replace me. He couldn't qualify. His income had been a mess for years, and without my name behind him, every metric failed. And there was nobody else in his life with the credit and the willingness to take on $35,000 in joint debt. His parents weren't in a position to help. Bree's salary alone didn't carry it. The commercial truck, the one for the business he'd mostly stopped running, was repossessed on a Thursday. Carol saw the notice on a neighborhood app and told me with a careful look, the kind that asks whether you're okay. I was okay. They left the old house on day 21. The property manager I'd hired did the walkthrough that afternoon, and the report wasn't good. Damaged interior doors. A hole punched in the drywall of the master closet. Deep gouges in the hardwood in the hallway that looked like furniture had been dragged on purpose rather than lifted. A crack across the glass of the patio door that hadn't been there before. The repairs ran $11,000. I filed a claim and a civil damages report. One more thread in a fabric of consequences Marcus was slowly learning he'd have to wear. The sale closed in early spring. The new family's little girl wrote her name in chalk on the front step the first evening they had the keys. I happened to drive by and saw it, and I felt something I can only describe as right. That house needed new handwriting in it. It had needed it for years. The net, after the mortgage payoff and closing costs, came to a little over $600,000. I bought a smaller place out in Winters, a town Diane, and I had always loved, west of the city where the land opens up, farmhouse style. 2 bedrooms. A real workshop and a back porch that faces west toward a stand of old oaks. I moved in late spring, and the very first thing I hung on the workshop wall, before I unpacked a single box, was the bridge. 3 weeks later, Bree called from a number I didn't know. I answered. Her voice was quieter than I'd heard it in years. Some of the hardness had gone out of it. Dad, it's me. I know. We're in an apartment in North Highlands. It's fine. We're fine. A pause. Marcus lost the rest of the contracts without the truck. He's looking for work. Another pause. Longer. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I waited. I've learned the power of waiting. I've been thinking about what you said. That I didn't call to apologize. Her breath caught. You were right. I should have called you the night he left that voicemail. I should have told him he was wrong and told you I was sorry. That same night. I didn't, and I don't fully understand why I didn't. I've been talking to a therapist about it. She stopped. Anyway, I just wanted to say it. I'm sorry. For at least that much. For at least that much. And right there is how I knew she meant it. A strategic apology doesn't admit how much is still left unsaid. Only an honest one does. Thank you, I said. That means something. Are you okay? Are you happy? I looked out the workshop window at the oaks. A red-tailed hawk was riding a thermal somewhere over the ridge. Carol was coming for dinner. The bridge was maybe 3 weeks from finished. I am, I said. For the first time in a long time, I really am. The quiet that followed wasn't cold. It was the kind of quiet that means someone is sitting with a true thing they hadn't expected to hear. I'm glad, she said. And I believed her. We didn't make plans. We didn't promise weekly calls. I told her she could reach me at this number whenever she was ready, and she said okay, and we hung up. I stood in the workshop a long while after that. And here's what I want to leave you with, because I've had a lot of quiet evenings out here to think it through. This whole thing taught me that a structure that's been compromised doesn't always have to come down. Sometimes you can shore it up, reinforce the weak sections, build new load paths around the damage, and end up with something more honest than what was there before. Not the original that's gone, but something new, something that knows exactly where its weak points are. Whether that ever happens with Bree and me isn't a promise. It's a possibility. And which one it becomes depends entirely on the choices that come after. But the bigger thing, the thing I most need you to hear if any part of this story felt like looking in a mirror, is this. The mistake most people make, the mistake I made for 4 years, is confusing love with disappearance. I told myself that being a good father meant absorbing every small disrespect without complaint. That patience had no bottom. That kindness meant letting myself be sanded down to nothing. It doesn't. Kindness is not weakness, and patience is not a standing invitation to be used. There is no version of love not parental, not any kind that requires you to accept being erased. And here's the part that took me the longest to understand. The most ethical thing I did in this entire mess wasn't the notice or the cosigner paperwork or the sale. It was the moment I refused to keep pretending, because pretending wasn't protecting anyone. It was just delaying the day of reckoning and calling the delay love. So here's what I'd ask you to do today. If this hit close to home, just one thing. Find the one disrespect you've been telling yourself. Doesn't matter the small displacement you keep absorbing to keep the peace, and say its real name out loud, even if it's only to yourself. Naming it is where everything starts. And then sit with this question, the one I had to sit with on my worst night. If someone you love has been quietly teaching you that you don't matter, is protecting their comfort really love? Or is it just fear wearing love's coat? I'd really like to know where you land on all this. So tell me if you think Walter did the right thing, comment with a 1. If you think he went too far, comment with a 2. And if you think he didn't go far enough, comment with a 3. I read them. I read all of them. While you're down there, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is where you are right now, because it amazes me to think about all of us in all these different places, sitting with the same questions. And if you've ever been made to feel like a stranger in your own life by people who were supposed to love you, I'd genuinely like to hear your story. There's room for it in the comments. If this one moved you, even a little, do me a favor and subscribe. I sit out here on this west-facing porch and tell these stories because I believe the quiet ones, the ones about dignity and the slow courage it takes to reclaim it, are the ones we need most, and I'd be honored to have you back for the next one. Stick around. There's more coming. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Sacramento to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.